I'm playing. As I mentioned, I met some guys here in Japan that also play pre-modern Magic the Gathering, which
Yeah.
is my pinky out creme de la creme these days. Um, it just it is the Magic that I love and I remember,
Yeah.
and I think that's what it really comes down to is like it is it is the Magic that I fell in love with, and nothing more, nothing less.
Yeah.
And the fact that it is also a closed box, so to speak, in that Wizards can't add new cards to it, their new design philosophies can't affect it. Unfortunately, the reserve list does, but I'm lucky enough where I have most of the reserve cards that would be played, and no one cares in pre-modern if you do proxy. It's kind of encouraged. You want to use gold border, do it.
So I
You
can
want to
run up
use
with my
just
60 card printed?
yep. Yeah, one of the guys at the event I went to, the whole 75 complete computer paper,
Two office
and
works.
it was just like, hey, no problem, man. Like we're that's and I think that's the thing I appreciate is like it is to me pre-modern is whatever you want it to be.
Mm.
If you like for me, I purposely go out of my way. I love black border old cards with the old border. That's
The
to
old
me
frame has
that's
a lot of character, the modern one lacks. The modern one's
yes.
very
And
utilitarian.
I have stacks of them here in front of me, and I'm just like, yes, I can read the new cards very well. Like I'm happy the rules text is clarified
Old green is
sometimes.
hard to read.
That it's very fair, but at the same time, it just to me is like this is the Magic that I love, and nothing can like the artwork being actual like non-digital mediums for the most part because it only goes up to pre-modern ends with Scourge, which is 2003, and the, I think there's maybe I think no our chroma's not. There's maybe a couple early computer graphic
How does that relate to
like
6th edition? Because 6th edition is the big change for Magic, isn't it?
sixth edition was a big rules change, and like so the one thing that I do like so pre-modern, unlike old school or some of the other formats, uses all modern rules, so
Ah.
it makes it
So no
very
mana burn.
easy. No mana burn, no damage on the stack, modern mulligan rules,
Hmm.
and the the thing that I think is underappreciated about that is A, it makes it very easy to jump into a game or for someone else to hand them a deck and here you go.
Yeah, actually,
Because
that's why I was
I
asking
have
about Slivers, because I was thinking later on, once I have a setup for it, and I'll buy a webcam, could play Magic as part of this.
yeah, absolutely. We'll have it in the background. And that's like I some of the guys I met, they said like I started playing Magic in 2015 and my brain kind of breaks a little bit because I'm just like their life experience with Magic is so short and their what they consider like normal is so wildly different than me.
Yeah.
But the fact that all the rules are the same means they can jump in and play. Or the other thing is, if you wanted to play on the official client, MTGO, you can do that with pre-modern because the rules don't change. And so the client uses the modern rules.
I'm
Whereas
old.
some
I
of
remember stuff like Cockatrice.
yeah, yeah, and that's like uh, old school or 93, 94, or some of the others, you
I've
have
wanted to
to
play that.
play you can play them on cockatrice or whatever, or like obviously in person is when it's juicy. But
Yeah.
like the mechanics of like there is mana burn and there is those issues in old school in 93, 94, and so it becomes something that you can't replicate with technology if you wanted to play online. And we'll talk a little bit about the on off after,
Yeah.
but just going to talk about so the time wise that a buddy of mine recently was just like, this is the Magic that I fell in love with. This is why I became a Magic player. And I think that for me, those cards of that era, that that is like magic to me. Like if you tell me, oh yeah, the creatures are super strong and they end the game quick, I think of Yu-Gi-Oh! I don't think of Magic.
Yeah.
But if I look at modern decks sometimes, and even Legacy and Vintage, like some of my favorite, what were my favorite formats, I've kind of fallen out of love. I never thought I'd fall out of love with Legacy. And I have slowly started to fall out of love with Legacy just because so many of the creatures and so many of the spells that I thought were immutable have just slowly been replaced. And for the first time, I think ever, I finally took apart my legacy decks. I have all my dual lands back in a binder, and I'm just like, I couldn't play these decks with anyone because they're not. I haven't updated a legacy deck in since 2016, and so much has happened in the last 7, 8 years in Magic that I just couldn't play with those decks and have an interesting game. It would be we both know Force of Will. It'd be like playing Force of Will from 2017, 2018 with modern decks, and it's just like it's not a game, so to speak.
Yeah, and going back to what you said about the older cards infesting the legacy formats, I think what's the big point there is, as Magic changed as a game, I think its identity changed because of, while Wizards hasn't outright said it, I think they desperately were chasing the Yu-Gi-Oh type crowd and where the market was going. I think I've talked about this at some point on the channel, but I think that itself changes Magic's identity as a game.
And, and,
And
and
you
not
can
only
feel
that, but I think that the culture has changed as well. I've seen younger people or just people that are newer to Magic, they look at games like formats like pre-modern, like this looks boring. This doesn't look fun. Like, and it it's a shock to my system. At the same time, I mean, I don't know about you. I don't watch TikTok. I don't watch
no,
Instagram. I'm not into short form media.
no.
But I think that the modern game, and this is something we'll talk more about, I'm sure, but like Magic is a different game for different people. And I think all games are like this, but as they change, the same with Yu-Gi-Oh, the same with Force of Will, I'm sure the same with many Pokemon even, that there's probably for many people, if they stopped playing a game, there's probably a point where their threshold was met. Ha, I made a pre-modern joke talking about it. But there's a threshold where the game's identity is no longer corresponding with what they mentally associate that game with. And a
Absolutely.
healthy response. A healthy response to that is okay, this is no longer for me. I will not participate or I will not do that. I will continue to play with what I like. However, that is often not the case, especially when it's maybe your first time going through that. And there are arguments, and as I'm saying this, when Brawl came out, the Melee and Brawl feud was huge because the game went from hyper competitive to super casual. When another game that I can speak with some authority on is Force of Will. It absolutely is a different game now.
Oh yeah.
Now, I have personal visions of it being a lesser game, but there are people that like better the game. And I know you liked the Alice Origins. That was more your like just speed, style, design was more your cup of tea and
The speed
totally
and
fine.
power was what I could cope with, and I liked a lot more of the design style. They're going back to older cards. Is it my ideal Will? It's probably the closest, but it's not perfect by any regard.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's true for many games. So I think it just is one of those things where if you choose to stick with the game long term, and I don't just mean like, hey, I picked up this game for a couple weeks, I'm going to probably play it. That's cool.
When
Do
it becomes
whatever.
a lifestyle thing.
Yes. And sometimes as I've gotten older, I've seen more and more of the addiction side of it where people can't stop.
Oh, I got in big trouble on my Discord for using that word.
Addiction? No, absolutely. It is manufactured addiction. It is absolutely part of the industry. Like, if I asked, for example, I won't use names because we're doing a fun podcast, but if I asked some of the people behind the scenes at major card games what the pull rates are, they could spend hours going over exact rates, how exactly they want people to pull, what they want them to pull, how many good cards should be in a set, etc. They could go into depth. If you ask them what cards are being played currently, they would have no clue. They would have no association with the game itself, only with the play pieces and their accessibility and what that would mean in terms of per person capita spending.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely manufactured, and I understand and you understand that you do need some of that for a game to function as a product.
Yeah.
But
Even as an
as a
indie game, you
player,
need certain thresholds met to continue.
yes, but as a player, I'm not concerned with any of that. My printer is just as good as yours in that case. And I think that, I think I am saddened sometimes when I see young people or even older people, people in general, that fall victim to the dopamine hits or their community or their game abusing them past what I believe is a healthy threshold. And now that's the thing. There's a threshold that's different for everybody. I have certain standards that I think are healthy. Other people may disagree, and that's totally fine. But it just bums me out sometimes when I see people, and I've seen it in Magic for many years, even back in the day, spending money they did not have for discretionary spending on things they shouldn't be buying. And then the horror stories that come afterwards of like, I gotta sell everything to pay for my car. And it's like, and they're getting robbed both ways because no one's ever paying full price when the guy needs money, kind of thing. So it just, that kind of stuff breaks my heart. But yeah, so there's a lot in there.
This was a clip from the Extra Deck podcast. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like, comment, and subscribe. It helps out the channel a lot. Also, be sure to check out my card game, Juken. It's the one with the wrestling, and the animals, and the key blasts. Every purchase of Juken not only supports the channel, but helps get the following sets produced. Thanks for watching.